Hello, I hope everybody's having a fantastic night. At least that's what time it is for me. We're going to be recording more often here and uploading more frequently, which is better. It's better for me to get on a better schedule and just, set myself up like that. Because I've been kind of struggling with that a little bit, finding that rather difficult. But we're getting better with it and becoming more consistent with it. We're going to be cycling today, which means we're just going to be doing a creepypasta instead of true stories, but still fun, still different. And I hope you guys enjoy listening to today's story as much as I did reading it. Over the past few decades, a disturbing rumor has spread throughout the backwoods settlement of Littlefork. People there tell tales of so-called alternates who kidnap and impersonate the small town's residents. Taking the form of their victims, they appear human at first glance, but the alternates possess uncanny facial features like dead, bulging eyes and unusually long limbs. Of course, none of this concerned Dr. Emma Wilton. She was in search of another Littlefork legend, the ivory-billed woodpecker, once the largest woodpecker in the US. The bird was now considered extinct by most ornithologists, Emma included. Although the last official sighting of the bird occurred in 1941, some in the area claimed to have seen a large bird with shiny black plumage, not unlike those of the ivory-billed woodpecker. Emma made the trip to Littlefork alone, stopping first at the town's only hotel, an old, rickety porch wrapped around the front of the building. There, two older men sat in wicker chairs and smoldering cigarettes between their fingers. They watched Emma with a blank stare. Smoke spilled from their lips. Inside, a portly woman sat behind the counter. She sighed as Emma approached, as if annoyed that she actually had to work. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes, I booked a room. It should be under Robert Monroe," Emma said. The woman blinked long and slow. "You're not Robert Monroe." "No, but the room was booked for 2 people." "That's right," the receptionist said. "And I'm the second person. I'm Emma Wilton." "I see," the woman said. "And where is Mr. Monroe?" "He decided not to come." "Why not?" "That's personal." Emma forced a smile, but it was hard to hide the irritation in her voice. "Well, I can't let you stay in the room. It's booked under his name." Emma sucked her teeth and glanced around the dingy interior of the hotel. Aside from the 2 men out front, the place was dead. Meaning, no offense, but this doesn't look like to be a busy hotel. "None taken," the receptionist replied dryly. "What are the chances someone would come to the hotel and correctly guess the name of a guest?" The fat receptionist pushed a greasy strand of her hair behind her ear and shrugged. "Company policy. You can call him if..." "No," Emma said quickly. "You must have his number on file. How about you call him, okay?" With a sigh, the woman picked up the phone and dialed Robert's number. While they waited for him to pick up, Emma paced around the lobby. She stopped by a bulletin board, which only had 2 papers pinned to it. One was a flyer for a local concert scheduled for 2 months ago. The other was a wrinkled notice about a missing girl. According to the faded, black letters, the girl's name was Ashley. She had disappeared 2 years ago at the age of 16. Sad. But again, it was none of Emma's concern. While the receptionist dialed Robert's number for a second time, the old man from across the porch entered. "Don't get many visitors," said the first. He was missing most of his teeth, and his breath reeked of tobacco. "Not safe around these parts," said the second. He had thin, shriveled lips that seemed to stretch to the edges of his face. He pointed to the missing person poster on the bulletin board. Emma offered a polite smile. I'm just here for the forest, she said. That's exactly the place you need to avoid. There's a killer in those woods. Done skinned poor Ashley, and she ain't the only one, the toothless man said. Not so. Wasn't no killer, the other said. His friend shook his head and sighed. They say she was seen in the neighbor's barn, but she wasn't nothing but a cheap copy, a fake, an alternate. Emma had heard the tales, but she didn't have the energy to argue with a couple of old men. Yes, well, I will be careful. Thank you for your concern. Fortunately, Emma was called over by the receptionist, who happily informed her that she could not reach Robert. Having left him a message, the receptionist told Emma she could leave her luggage and walk around the town in the meantime. It was just as well. She had had enough of the hotel and the irritating people inside it. With a camera slung around her neck, Emma decided to venture into the forest for an early start on her research. The ancient woodland encircled Littlefork on all sides. Like a fetid, green shadow, it lurked behind every building and at the end of each road. However, there were no traces into the Littlefork forest. They had all gone unused and overgrown with vegetation. Gnarled branches crossed over one another like a wall of mossy veins, and from the earth rose tall reeds of grass that hid the forest interior from view. Just behind the hotel, Emma found a small gap in the trees. Petite as she was, she managed to slip through without much effort. Yet, just as she disappeared into the shaded woods, Emma felt a cold gaze on her neck. She glanced back and saw the men from the hotel watching her. Their faces were blank and expressionless. She thought nothing of it. Emma had more pressing matters on her mind. After a conversation with the receptionist, she began to think about Robert Monroe, an esteemed ornithologist like herself. Robbie was a silver-tongued man with a chiseled jaw and piercing blue eyes. And whether by luck or a sheer force of will, he was also the sort of man that acquired anything his heart desired. So it wasn't long before Emma fell under his charms and into his bed. In between their frequent bouts of lovemaking, Emma and Robbie found time to collaborate on academic ventures. Even professionally, they had chemistry. Their interests and ideas always complemented one another, and together, they had published a few papers. So, as their personal and professional lives faded into one another, Emma found herself thinking about Robbie at all hours of the day, and in time, her thoughts turned to the future. This would not be a problem for any other couple in a relationship. However, from Robbie's perspective, they were not in fact in a relationship. Therefore, when Emma began discussing her desire to have a daughter one day and how lovely their own child might look, Robbie decided to set the record straight. He also decided it would be healthier for them to go their separate ways. Emma cursed herself for being so oblivious. Part of her hoped this search for the ivory-billed woodpecker would train her to be more attentive. Yet, as she looked around at the expansive canopy of trees, she saw no creatures, not even a squirrel or a sparrow. She listened for the repetitive tap, tap, tap of a woodpecker's beak, but Emma heard only a soft, sighing wind and the groan of shifting branches. Woodpeckers have a particular fondness for dead trees, so Emma followed a path of decay to deeper and darker sections of the woods, where hollowed oaks and twisted beeches lay in toppled wrecks. Shadows played against their shattered bodies as the sun descended into evening. While Emma gazed around in search of the bird, she noticed a rustling among the trees. At first, she thought it might be the rustle of a creature in the canopy, but whatever made the sound was bigger. As it moved through the forest, it shook entire trees so that their rotten trunks bent and snapped. Emma could even feel the ground tremble as the beast drew near. Backing up slowly, Emma raised her camera. Through the lens, she glimpsed a small fraction of what lumbered through those trees. At once, she grew sick from that oozing and unwholesome form riddled with scabrous growths and hair-like filaments. The creature uttered a gurgling moan. Panic filled her. and she staggered backward in fear. As a fleshy tendril reached towards Emma, her foot slipped on a twisted root and she tumbled down a hill. The hill was not so tall or steep to warrant concern. However, when Emma fell backwards, her head struck the corner of a jagged rock. The last thing she remembered before her vision went dark was the crunch of her camera beneath her. No doubt concussed from the head trauma, Emma passed between bouts of waking and unwaking, and in that limbo between dream and reality, she saw herself carried away by a looming mass of withering flesh. It wrapped her in its moist appendages and stroked her belly in a swift, obsessive circle. Although terrifying to look at, the creature was not evil in itself. On the contrary, it dotted over her well-being with warm, gentle touches, not unlike a mother with her child. Once Emma came to, she found herself in a cave on a bed of moss. Moonlight shone through a hole in the stone ceiling. It fell on her like a pale spotlight upon a stage. Yet, as far as Emma could tell, there was no audience watching her. The comforting environment eased her nerves to a small degree. Emma found herself able to rationalize all that had happened. She told herself the beast was nothing more than a mangy bear. Frightened, she had tripped and fallen through the hole in the cave ceiling. All that nonsense about being tended to by a fleshy monster was nothing more than a dream. Indeed, Emma felt completely calm and rational. Her only concern was the gash atop her head. But, judging by the dried clumps of blood in her hair, the wound had already clotted. In addition, Emma still felt sick to her stomach. No doubt, it was a lingering effect of that revolting and woolly imaged nightmare. A low chatter rumbled through the cave, and Emma saw a shadow play against the walls. She looked around for her camera, but found it was missing. "Hello?" she said. There was no reply. "Is someone there? I'm hurt." But no one answered. Emma got to her feet. Her stomach flopped and her head dizzied. Regardless, she pushed ahead. She had to get back to the hotel. No doubt, the receptionist would have something snarky to say, but she needed proper medical care and a bed. Hopefully, Robbie had returned the receptionist's message. As Emma stumbled down the dark passages of the cave, she came upon a group of childlike drawings scrawled in chalk. Under the slanted moonlight, these drawings depicted happy families with wide, goofy smiles. Innocent as they were, there was something off about the drawings. The family members' forms and expressions were stretched and skewed as if the artist did not fully understand the human body. What's more, there was a sketch of some other form. Not by any stretch of the imagination could it be confused with a human. Long, cystic limbs surfaced from spotted globs of flesh, while lidless eyes bulged from sparsely hairy masses. It was not certain what this abomination had to do with the grinning families, but it was certain Emma had seen it before. Emma pressed on through dank and dreary tunnels. She followed broad, smothered out paths that coiled this way and that. She trudged past cold, inky pools whose depths she could not fathom. All the while, her head ached and her stomach panged. She clutched her gut. It was bloated and firm. After a seemingly endless sequence of passages, Emma came upon the exit. The first morning light peeked above the horizon, penetrating the forest in pale swathes. She had really been in that cave for that long. It didn't matter. Emma had entered the forest from the east. If she followed the rising dawn, she could find her way back to Littlefork. Just then, a guttural bellow erupted behind her, and Emma heard the dull scrape of flesh against stone. At once, she ran into the forest as fast as she could. She ran without even looking back, knowing she wouldn't like what she would see. And yet, despite her desperation, Emma could only run so fast and so far. Her feet were heavy, and her stomach throbbed with acute pain. When she could force herself no longer, she leaned against the trunk of a rotted birch and gazed down at the source of her pain. Her belly was massive. She pulled up her shirt to get a better look. Blue veins struck sharp paths across her skin, and although there was no obvious sign of injury, that didn't rule out the possibility of internal bleeding. Judging by the size of her gut, the bleeding was serious. Without help, it would certainly prove fatal. By now, Emma knew there was no point to running in her current condition. She wouldn't make it far, so she fought back by flinging both rocks and obscenities. By the sound of it, the creature was hurt more emotionally than physically, for it merely suffered Emma's attacks with a disappointed whimper. Although the revolting beast did not leave, it at least kept its distance. Its engorged eyes peered through the crooked trees while its tentacled limbs twisted and snapped. It was waiting. And just then, the lumbering mass beyond the trees issued a long bellow. Emma was not safe just yet. The bristly heap of flesh peeled back the trees and pulled itself towards her. Emma grabbed her clothes and rose to her feet. She screamed and threw a rock. Emma didn't even wait to see if the rock hit. She bolted as far and as fast as her feet would carry her. For well on an hour, Emma jogged through the trees. When she could jog no more, she decided to walk. And when she could not walk, she stopped to dress. There was still a small trickle of blood, but for the most part, her wounds had clotted. Dawn had bloomed in slanted shades of orange and red. A cool wind blew against Emma's face, and the trees swayed to and fro. The only sounds were of the squirrels chattering, the sparrows tweeting, and an incessant tap. Emma craned her head to stare up at the trees, and it was then she sighed. The ivory-billed woodpecker. The regal bird hacked away at a dead oak with its strong, straight bill. Its feathers shone red, white, and lustrous black. The long-lost bird was a beauty to behold, but all Emma could feel in the moment was contempt. In time, Emma found her way out of the forest and into the narrow dirt path. She followed the long and lonely road back to Littlefork. There, the townspeople called her an ambulance and sent her on her way. She did not tell them what she had endured, nor did she tell the doctors at the hospital. They would not believe her. They would not understand. Following the traumatic events in the woods, Emma entered a state of intense apathy. Her memories were now so full of pain. To avoid the feeling of them, she had learned to not feel at all. The night had changed her, and in the darkest hours, Emma wondered whether the monster had stolen her humanity. A week after the events took place, Emma received a phone call. It was Robbie. Emma just hung up the phone. She did not doubt Robbie's story, but she did not want to hear it. She already knew the truth. Someone had attacked that lady. Someone was in the psych ward. A second Emma. A copy. An alternate. Thank you everyone for listening. This is one of many stories that has been written and now told. I appreciate all the love and support, and remember, please subscribe. I hope you enjoyed today's story as much as I did reading it.